It's the ERP Confab. I'm David Essex, industry editor at TechTarget's SAP site. Like most vendors, SAP is under tremendous pressure to show that it's on top of the generative AI wave that rose up when ChatGPT made its debut in November. So it's no surprise that using AI for business was the overriding theme of SAP's recent Sapphire 2023 conference. SAP also used the show to continue pushing its sustainability, cloud, and S/4HANA initiatives. I discussed the virtual version of the Orlando event with news writer Jim O'Donnell. Then I chat with our colleague Brian McKenna, business applications editor at Computer Weekly, about the Sapphire event that he attended in Barcelona. Jim, last week, SAP had its annual Sapphire conference in Orlando. We went to the virtual conference this year, and you've done a lot of coverage of some of the main news that had a lot to do with AI, not surprisingly, and sustainability. You want to talk a little bit about what you think the sort of the biggest news was last week?
Yeah, that's right. We had to cover it virtually, so it was a little bit different. I could really you couldn't dig in as deeply on some of the subjects, but as you said, sort of the two main issues that they were kind of pushing from their main stage keynote addresses, with of course the leadership of SAP, Christian Klein, and some of the other lieutenants in the executive board, were sustainability and AI. I think probably the first thing they talked a lot about was AI. They're positioning it as, I think Christian Klein in the opening keynote called it AI built for business. Mm-hmm. So I guess they're trying to distinguish it from the myriad of other AI announcements that everybody's coming out with now. I think in a certain sense, they've been working on AI for a long time, like, a lot of the other enterprise vendors have their own sort of AI technology that they've been working on, right? I'm sure you've known that from covering SAP for a while too. But I think this whole sort of explosion of generative AI, and as we've all seen the announcements that every company is coming out with, some version, some use case for AI, some embedded. So I think I wouldn't say they were forced to announce this stuff, but I think they felt, some sort of pressure to devote, a lot of the attention on AI, because that's what people are sort of expecting, and that's what people are looking for. And their approach is, as I said, they've been developing their own AI, but this generative AI that they were talking about at Sapphire was a lot around their partnerships. So they've been looking to use partnerships to further their AI tech. And the big ones that they brought out at Sapphire was a partnership with Microsoft, right? And he had Satya Nadella was not on stage live, but they had a recorded message with him, having a brief interview with Christian Klein. And they're embedding Microsoft Copilot AI into certain SAP platforms. First one that we talked about was they're going to embed Microsoft Copilot into SAP SuccessFactors, which is kind of their cloud HR platform. They showed how HR managers can sort of use the Copilot AI to generate. One use case was generating specific job descriptions. So you have all this like information about, what a company might want in something what they want to hire for a job they want. But, they said, sort of the traditional way of making a job description is the HR manager will, take a bunch of stuff, and that's not always really appropriate. They're always kind of more general than they need to be. So they said, that they can, use this to have like more highly developed, more specific job descriptions that will, lead to more efficient ways to hire people for the jobs that they need. Another thing was Copilot embedded into a learning system through SuccessFactors, so employees can sort of plot their professional development a little more specifically. That they can ask Copilot to come up with the courseware or the skills they might need to to further whatever their ambitions might be further. So none of these were exactly mind-bendingly use cases that were useful, but like not vital to companies, but they do help people do specific jobs by taking a lot of drudge work out and sort of pointing things in a direction where they could be more efficient and go further. And there were other use cases, but I think that was the main things that they really talked about in the first keynotes.
One thing I noticed in going over the announcements of the AI tools is that it is a mix. Much of the stuff they were talking about coming out in the fourth quarter of this year. So there was a bit of a demoware feel for a good chunk of I thought the keynotes.
Yep.
But they definitely have some of these things available now, including, for example, intelligent invoice conversion, which they say is for procurement teams, help them onboard new suppliers. Right. AI can extract the information about the supplier from the invoices. They say that's available now. And there were a couple of other capabilities that are in fact available, but it was quite a mix. And I totally agree with your take that they're under pressure. So many companies, pretty much every tech company is under pressure to show what they're doing with generative AI, because it's just been so mainstream. It's been on 60 Minutes, it's been on the nightly news. And so to some degree, this is stuff that was in the works, and a lot of it felt kind of hurry up. Like, we're going to announce this intention, and we're working on it, but it's coming supposedly in a few months. Yeah.
And I totally agree. And some of the observations I heard were, that there is sort of this gap between what they've announced and the clarity on when all this stuff is going to be available, right? Mm-hmm. As you said, they sort of announced a lot of things, but there was not real clear sort of, there were no clear dates on when any of this stuff was going to be available. As you said, some of it might be available now. Some is coming further down the road or by the end of the year. So, I think customers are just going to have to, pay attention and kind of keep up if they're interested in any of this stuff. That they'll just have to make sure that they're keeping up with their release schedules and when all this stuff is going to be available. And I will say too that I think that there does seem to be, a couple of the observers I talked to said there's who were talking with some of the customers actually at the event, and they said that there did seem to be a kind of a disconnect between this AI hype and what's available and what the customers are really looking for, right?
Yeah, you wrote a whole piece on that. I read that. That was one of your at least 3 pieces you've written so far to come out of the conference.
I think it was the analyst Joshua Greenbaum had said he talked to some of the customers who, they had AI, and him and the other analyst John Reed had in it a discussion with ASUG, which is the America's SAP user group, they're sort of the co-hosts of Sapphire, so they always have their own sort of events and sessions. And they had a kind of a quick poll of some of the attendees from ASUG, and AI was sort of pretty far down the list of priorities of what those customers were looking for. And they said they were more interested in things like, data integrity and data integration and sort of data migration. That was really nothing that was spoken of at all in any of sort of the main sessions. Now you can get all kinds of that information, in Sapphire, right? You can go and there's plenty of sessions. There's plenty of product booths and product demos. So the information is definitely there, but there was sort of no acknowledgement of it from the main stage, which is, it's kind of odd because it's something that, I think that most customers are probably, and SAP had released this platform called SAP DataSphere probably about two or so months ago.
Yeah.
Which is a data integration platform. And, it's really, it's kind of, it would expect that, if data integration is a top priority for a lot of the customers, that it might have been, featured more prominently, and it didn't seem that it was. So that was kind of interesting.
What you just mentioned in your piece about the customer reactions and what the analysts Greenbaum and Reed were saying about what they're hearing from customers, what really jumped out at me again was that there's more interest among customers, and I think more pain points about integration and as you said, data, especially removing data silos, and that stuff that has been an issue for years and years for a lot of these other emerging technologies we've been hearing about, like workflows, process automation. It happens in the HR world, the HCM world, where you're trying to relate financials to talent information and employee, other employee data.
Yep.
And you can't do a lot of this stuff unless customer experience. It's a big aspect of that too. And you can't do a lot of these gee whizzy things unless your systems are integrated, especially your legacy systems. But in some cases, it's maybe multiple vendors, not even very old systems, just relatively new systems that don't talk to each other very well. So
what does AI depend on, right? It depends on having good data. So you can't even do all this, as you said, the gee whizzy AI stuff if your data is not in good shape. So that's got to be at the heart of it. And as I said, I'm sure that if anyone was really looking for that data integration, information about SAP DataSphere, that type of information is definitely available. And one customer that I did speak to, said that was an issue for them, and they did find, they had, several sessions that they went to about data at Sapphire. So it's there. It's just it wasn't really featured very prominently in the in the sort of the official sessions.
I think we've just provided ourselves a nice segue, because one of the things that you and I have talked about, you've written a lot for our new TechTarget sustainability and ESG site. It's a topic we both follow fairly closely with some of our colleagues, many of our colleagues. And in that world, collecting the data to do the reporting, also to get true control over your use of resources, especially energy and buildings is a classic one, that's been an issue for years, and it's been an integration problem for years. And so there is some movement and also some new branding from SAP in that regard that came out of Sapphire.
So as we said, that was sort of the other, I would say the other big issue that they talked about, certainly on the first day when they kind of like set the stage for what their goals are. And they kind of they have this concept, and it's not really a product that I can figure out, but it's a concept called the Green Ledger, right? And so what this is treating carbon emissions counting, treating sustainability data accounting the same way you would treat financial accounting. They have a ledger. If you're in finance, you collect all the data from your accounts, and it goes into a ledger, and it balances out. And so this concept of the green ledger takes all the data that's related to your sustainability that will come from your whole value chain, from your supply chain, from the carbon you use in your buildings, from the we all know about the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions, which are extremely complicated. It's very hard to get a grip on that. So you will eventually end up with this so-called green ledger. And I think I don't know if anyone else uses that term. I don't know if it's something that they just cooked up, but the concept is the same, that sustainability data will be treated as essentially as financial data. Now, there's reasons for this, because there are regulations that are coming in from certainly more in Europe. There's a lot of sort of regulatory regimes they're coming. They're already there in Europe, and more coming online in the United States, in North America. Well, certainly, I'm not sure what Canada is doing, but the U.S. We'll have SEC regulations regarding sustainability and carbon reporting are going to be coming online. So there are these reasons why companies do have to start thinking about this now. So as I said, the Green Ledger it's sort of a concept, but there are a couple products that they did announce at Sapphire that will sort of integrate that data, that will collect that data and allow it to be shared, and that will go into this Green Ledger, however form that takes. One of them is an update for a product that they call now, it's SAP Product Footprint
Sustainability.
Management.
It became Sustainability Footprint, I think. Another name change.
Yes, right. Sustainability Footprint Management. So that's going to allow companies to sort of calculate and manage all that carbon data from their from their value chain. Now, how they do that, I'm not sure, but this will give them the, the ability to have a place for it to go. And the other one, which is a new product, is SAP Sustainability Data Exchange, which is kind of a network exchange product, which allows companies to share the data that they have in their system with their suppliers, partners, presumably customers. And what's interesting is these products will be available as part of, so they're all based on S/4HANA Cloud, right? So they're cloud products based on S/4HANA, and they will be part of Rise with SAP, which is sort of the program to move kind of the existing customer base into the cloud. We've talked about that a lot in the past, what they've done. And also with Grow with SAP, which is their new program to kind of move more, it's more centered on sort of smaller to mid-sized companies to move to, in particular, the S/4HANA public cloud edition. So having these sustainability, capabilities or products available in Rise with SAP and Grow with SAP is kind of an interesting approach. I think that it may actually kind of provide one more incentive, I would say, for companies, or one more use case for them to say maybe we'll start to adopt the cloud now, because we are going to have to do this, sustainability accounting, and this is a way for us to do that. So
great way to connect to your suppliers and your partners.
Exactly, right.
Over the cloud. Yeah. Jim, in your piece about the sustainability products, Michael McComb of SAP was quoted. Did you interview him? I'm just curious, or was this?
I did, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought he had a great, really tight summary and kind of honest about what's going on with the sustainability data. He said, this approach is aimed at increasing the data accuracy and granularity,
right,
and moving from these top-down averages toward a bottom-up approach that's similar to the financial flows through an organization. You wouldn't estimate an invoice, for example. That's a great summary of, I think, what's been going on and what the huge challenge is, though, because there's way better systems for entering the financial information and having that bubble up and roll up, as they say, to a top line number, and then you spit out, you have a monthly close and quarterly reports if you're a public company usually. But with this sustainability data, there's just such a huge challenge getting the accurate data in at the grassroots level, pun intended. Yeah.
And that's kind of the that is the the way that I think companies have reported on their sustainability up till now, probably still now, is they've used sort of industry averages, they've used sort of estimates, so it's almost all been estimated because there's been no sort of incentive to do it any other way. They've been kind of doing it basically to show that they're more green, to kind of to answer customer demand, of course, answer their employees' demand, that they are, being more responsible companies. But of course, we know it's subject to greenwashing. You can say anything you want in your estimate. So as you said, this is a way because I think the auditing of it and the reporting of it is going to be more like financial accounting auditing. So that's going to be more, something that companies are going to have to be paying attention to more. So you're not going to be able to use those estimates anymore. You're not going to be able to just, throw any number out that you want. You are going to have to get that, as you said, the granularity into it.
It'll be really fascinating to see how it works out, how it's really done. One of the phrases that crossed my mind in reading these things and watching some of these keynotes was, the devil is in the details. So it'll be interesting to see how soon we get a fairly complete case study of someone who's willing to talk to us about how they did it. They really did do it. They really do have granular, and it probably won't be every part. Maybe it'll just be the building energy use at first.
Right.
Some things are really hard to collect, like local food producers. There's certain kinds of data that is especially hard to digitize. Having been through the Orlando Sapphire with Barcelona to come, and we'll hear from Brian McKenna a little later about that conference. Where do you think this leaves SAP, both competitively, like in the cloud and AI wars, and just as a company? You've done some award-winning coverage of their history over now like 51 years, I think it is. How do you think this positioned them or didn't position them in the big sweep of things?
I think the AI stuff is remains to be seen, because I think that whole market is very open right now, and it depends on, I think, a lot of what customers will be looking for. I think I think that was, don't want to call it a sideshow, but I really don't think it's something that their customers are, as we said, is their top priority. I mean, I think their customers are, still looking for reasons to move to the cloud. They're looking for, help in that. They're looking for, basically the support, and as we talked about, the data, integration parts of it. So I think, just from that point of view, I don't think the AI stuff really matters all that much. They still got the problems that they have had with moving their, enormous sort of, still on-premises customer base to the cloud. But, programs like Rise with SAP and Grow, we didn't hear a ton about that from like the main stage sessions, but it was always part of it. So I think that from what they say, that those programs are growing, so to speak. And, they are helping to move the needle as far as that goes. So I think that's still their challenge. On the sustainability front, I think those products are definitely, I think they are hitting sort of at the right time. And I think that is a very big opportunity of growth for them. Mm-hmm. I think the market is coming around for that. They've been talking about it for a long time, and I think, 10 years ago, maybe people would have thought that they're not, it's not something they have to think about, but I do think, customers are thinking about that right now. So I think they're pretty well positioned as far as that goes.
Yeah, maybe their history in manufacturing is they're strong in
exactly,
because that's where a lot of the intensive resource use is, all through the supply chain, the subcontractors and then the raw material suppliers. Anyway, yep. I think you were about to say something.
Yeah, well, the other sort of other thing that we didn't touch on that I think is going to be very big for them going forward is, and this was something they did announce at Sapphire, was the SAP Business Networks for Industries. Mm-hmm. So they're going to be, they have the SAP Business Network, which is their sort of their combination of their procurement networks and their manufacturing networks and their logistics networks. So they combined those a few years ago into the business network. Now they're coming out with business networks for particular industries like life sciences or automotive or retail or oil and gas. Like they're going to come out with like networks where companies can sort of share all that data and can kind of work together outside of the enterprise. So, I think the future of ERP is going to be less like the enterprise resource planning, but more like maybe network resource planning, where, you're going to see you'll have to move outside of your company sort of boundaries.
It occurs to me that this sounds almost identical to the industry cloud concept that IDC has been banging a drum for years now.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to that.
Yeah, IDC directions that we also usually attend together. I feel like they've been banging that drum for 4 or 5 years now, maybe. Kind of lost track of time.
Yeah, and SAP's been talking about it for a while too. Yeah. I mean, they they've had their industry and other ERP vendors. They have their industry sort of their cloud industry clouds. So I know Infor does, and IFS, and I'm sure Oracle does too. So it's definitely a concept that's out there for sure.
It is. Well, Jim, it's been great to talk to you as always, and it's good to attend, albeit virtually, another Orlando Sapphire.
Yes, thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Brian, you attended the Sapphire in Barcelona. You went in person, unlike Jim and I, who attended the virtual Orlando conference. What were your general impressions in terms of attendance and sort of the flavor of it?
That's right, David. I went to the European version of Sapphire, what I've been calling Euro Sapphire, at the Fira de Barcelona, conference venue and exhibition venue in Barcelona. It was very well attended, about 5,000 attendees, I think officially, from 3,200 customers representing 1,800 organizations. Yeah, so basically about 5,000 people milling around the conference, which is a decent number. And yeah, and it was very kind of busy and buzzy and so on. And it's unlike last year, it had Christian Klein and Julia White on stage, and Scott Russell, their customer success executive board member, did the customer keynote on the second day. Last year, they sort of segmented the European event. They had like Northern Europe, and I think Germany, and I think Southern Europe. Last year, for us in Northern Europe, it was in The Hague. So this was a bit bigger than that, and it was, pan-European, as it were. I mean, the major announcements were really those that, that were made at Sapphire in Orlando to do with SAP's take on artificial intelligence, the embedding of artificial intelligence across all its applications, some of its generative AI stuff. There was one customer announcement that was kind of conceptually separate from the conference, but it was at the same time, and that was a tie-up with SAP, IBM, and Diageo, which is interesting because, of course, SAP and Diageo had a bit of a legal contretemps a few years ago, and there's a link to that in my very brief story about that contract. Diageo not on stage. The customers they had on stage were from a kind of Philips spin-out called Versuni, who make air fryers, and Swarovski, the jewelry company. And they've both been SAP customers for a long time. In fact, Swarovski, the contract, we found out the original contract was signed by Hasso Plattner himself 40 years ago. So these are not new customers for SAP, which is maybe kind of interesting. One of our favorite analysts, Holger Muller, said in an aside to me that, where is the big new S/4HANA cloud customer up on stage? I know that's something that's you've made note of as well.
I have. It seems that over the years that they've had S/4HANA and they've been emphasizing S/4HANA Cloud, that they have been vague about who has really gone to the SaaS version and who is on perhaps on-premises S/4HANA or has effectively the private cloud version, the name of which escapes me right now. It's interesting that somebody as astute as Holger Mueller would make that observation. It has been quite some time, and you have to wonder, what is the delay? My understanding of it as still as a layman, but as an informed observer, is that the full SaaS version, like a lot of SaaS ERP products, doesn't have all the functionality that certainly an on-premises business suite would have. And so I think some companies, unless they're doing a greenfield implementation, where this is their first ERP, maybe in a division, or just entirely as a company, their very first ERP, anyone who's trying to make the transition is probably concerned about what they lose and what kind of data transfer, what kind of data conversion issues are involved.
I think probably you and Jim have probably discussed SAP Business AI and the Green Ledger, because sustainability. I mean, to be fair to Christian Klein, we remember that right from the beginning of his tenure, he really has banged the drum for sustainability. So the Green Ledger was quite prominent as something to be mentioned at the event. Sustainability is also a big, one of the big focuses for their Chief Strategy Officer, who I had some time with as well, along with another journalist colleague, Sebastian Steinhäuser. Signavio and Business Network are another two of his, things that he looks after, as well as the general strategy thing. I also sat down with an SAP executive who's known very well to both of us, Sven Deniken. And Sven has changed role because he was S/4HANA for quite a few years. He's now industries and customer experience. So he's brought together industries and customer experience this year under his kind of purview, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, there seems
You
to
know,
be, certainly we've noticed at TechTarget that in the broader ERP universe, if you go beyond the core stuff, like certainly financials and even, procurement and human resources, that customer experience seems to be where a lot of the focus is lately, and a lot of the interest. It makes sense that Sven Deniken, who I always had found as to be a real straight shooter and enjoyed talking to him. I guess it makes sense. I'm not surprised to hear that he's had that shift in role.
and actually, customer relationship management is one of the kind of big areas on this diagram, this kind of
Mhm.
what we call I think they call the sunrise visual, that has the business technology platform
Mhm.
underneath, and then cloud ERP, then industry specific and sustainability, and then it has HCM,
Mhm.
business networking, and customer relationship management. Uh, Basically, line of business, right? Big emphasis on line of business. And then just beyond that, ecosystem solutions, and then AI powered business processes, which I think does give you quite a good picture of where SAP is trying to position itself, with the BTP underneath, with a big emphasis that it can't do everything everywhere. So it's at Sapphire, they were emphasizing the relationship with Google, with Microsoft, especially on the AI front, Google with this SAP data sphere, which does seem to be quite important to them.
It does,
So
yeah.
yeah, I'm a bit like Oracle as well, because Oracle Cloud World, there's a big emphasis on working with other people. Oracle can't do everything by itself, and SAP is saying something very similar.
Yeah,
Um,
I've been noticing that, and Jim and I were commenting that in our earlier discussion, that they've been gradually doing this over the years, where they've been bringing the partners out. But these are some pretty high-powered partners. Well, the Microsoft partnership that was emphasized, using the Chat GPT related functionality in the Copilot AI, and then with Office 365. And they had a relationship, I think, with some integrations between SAP systems and Office 365 that goes back to the previous year. So the way that SAP is trying to get more tentacles into the Office systems and the business systems.
Speaking of Office, formerly of Microsoft, Julia White was alongside Christian Klein on stage. She made an interesting remark, I thought. Well, not just me thinking this, but other people too. She said that in the context of on-premise, you can be loosely coupled with your partners, but with cloud, it's more like a marriage.
Interesting.
The
Yeah.
relationships have to be deeper,
Huh.
which I thought was quite an interesting remark. But certainly, they are emphasizing their work with other vendors. Just
Okay.
coming back to Sven Deniken, I mean, generative AI, Gen AI, utterly ubiquitous at Sapphire, and also at ServiceNow's event, which I attended the previous week in Las Vegas. Generative AI was absolutely, you couldn't miss it. What Sven said is the speed of evolution of generative AI. I mean, yes, this has been a long time coming, but the speed of evolution is breathtaking. He said the hype will go away, and ultimately, this isn't about efficiency so much as proficiency. He said cost and security often get forgotten, but it was a major thing at the event. So Ulf Brackman, Vice President of Artificial Technology, I listened to him in a Q&A session. He has like a lot of these German guys, been with SAP a long time. He worked on the Leonardo team that we all remember so fondly. I asked him, is this an inflection point? Is this a paradigmatic shift? Is this an iPhone moment? And he said yes. I suppose
Yeah.
he would say that, but
My sense from watching the Orlando conference is that, not surprisingly, I guess they had to kind of do a hurry up shift to generative AI in terms of their emphasis, because they had other AI things going on, and a good
yeah,
part of their story that they put out in the announcements was some of the older stuff. A lot of it was the newer stuff, the generative AI, some of which is here now, but most of which seems to be coming soon, not very long from now, but later in the year. Yeah, it's like everyone has had to suddenly shift gears and get on board the generative AI wave, I would say.
totally. Yeah, I mean it is. I mean, I was speaking to Nick Patience from 451, who was also there, another analyst, and he's been following AI for years and years and years, and he says he's never seen anything like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
We don't know how it's going to shake out. We're noticing this at TechTarget too. Like a lot of companies, we're having to figure out how to use it ourselves, and it's scary at the same time for many people, and it's exciting for some of the same people and others. But it's like one of these things that we're in it now. We're in the early stages, and we won't know what it turns out to be until it turns out to be whatever it's going to
to
be.
be that, whatever that thing
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. But and to be fair to SAP, they have been investing seriously and working seriously on artificial intelligence for a long time.
yes. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was seemingly jokingly referring to Leonardo, and ironically, the hotel where we stayed was called Leonardo. I think that
Mm-hmm.
was maybe a coincidence
Yeah.
rather than a deliberate thing.
So Leonardo hasn't fully disappeared from the from the SAP ecosystem in a sense.
And
Mhm.
their vocabulary, yeah. So I think those are probably my top lines
Mhm.
on the European Sapphire. It seemed pretty good. It's a big emphasis on customer outcomes. The SAP isn't just trying to sell people technology. It is involved with the success of its customers. Not so much doing consultancy, because I put that to Sebastian, the Chief Strategy Officer, who's ex-BCG. He's an ex-strategy consultant, the Chief Strategy Officer, but he said, no, it's more like guiding customers. It's not consulting with them, because they have all their partners for that, right? Deloitte, uh, whoever, the whole kind of list of those people who work with them. But yeah, that I'd say that was about it. It's probably fairly similar to Sapphire in the US.
Mhm.
It wasn't as cold, apparently. Everyone said that the air conditioning at Orlando everyone was just freezing.
I had not heard that. That is some good color there, Brian, that you just provided. I did not have the opportunity to experience that.
Now, I was not in Orlando, as you know. I
Yes.
was in Las Vegas for
Mhm.
ServiceNow's event. ServiceNow, led, of course, by the former Chief Executive Officer of SAP, Bill McDermott, who I have to say, was looking very rock and roll. He had a very expensive looking leather jacket to go with his shades. And ServiceNow, there are some similarities there again. Generative AI was very much being spoken about, perhaps in quite hyperbolic terms, in terms of what Bill was saying. Interesting to see some of the similarities
I
between.
understand they have a program. I think it's either for partners. Maybe you know more about it. Called Rise Up. Funny that that word "rise" should be used when his former company SAP has Rise with SAP.
Yeah, well,
Coincidence?
It was Bill's idea. I mean,
Yeah.
rise up.
Mhm.
Rise up is more about upskilling people.
Mhm.
I think the number is something like 1 million people to be skilled up on the trained in the ServiceNow platform. ServiceNow being was originally has its origins in ITSM and the kind of cloud delivery of that, but they've expanded from that. It's one of these cases of landing in IT and then expanding to other business functions as opposed to the other way around, which tends to give corporate IT a bit of a headache.
And they've had some great expansion. I noticed in your article from the Knowledge Conference, you noted, I think it was the previous year's fiscal year, tremendous
Yeah,
revenue growth,
they've had very good growth.
over 20%, as I
Um,
recall from your piece, at least in that
yeah,
particular year.
yeah. So they're probably on the verge of vying with SAP, Oracle, and Salesforce as an enterprise software
Mhm.
company.
It's quite an amazing story, really, when you think about it. We were certainly aware of them, let's say 10 years ago, but to go from which is fair to say is a niche, to have thought of ways to expand it and to convince customers to buy into it. They had to deliver something. You can tell that story and have good chartware, as I've been calling it lately, only for a year or two, and then people will wise up to whether the story makes sense or not, and apparently it does, and it does seem well situated for this world of, well, as Julia White was referring to, the multiple cloud products, combination of on-premises and cloud applications that can all come into a portal essentially on
Yeah,
ServiceNow.
I think they are partners.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, they all seem to be partners now.
They do.
Um, how does Bill McDermott describe ServiceNow? He's got a phrase for it. And Bill McDermott, describes ServiceNow as the intelligent platform for end-to-end digital transformation. Yeah, he was very hyperbolic on stage, it has to be said, Bill. The exponential enterprise, and he thinks there's going to be kind of massive technological change over the next year and a half, the likes of which we've never seen. They're partnering with NVIDIA,
Which just
which
had great
is,
earning results and
yeah,
brought the
yeah,
NASDAQ up almost on its own, according to what I saw in the business press yesterday.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, very much driven by the whole generative AI
Mhm.
explosion.
I think every year when we chat about Sapphire, I like to ask, where does it put SAP in its competitive situation with the likes of Oracle and other ERP vendors, and also other enterprise app vendors, certainly like Salesforce? And where does it put them in terms of their recent challenges and their 51-year history now? Kind of a big question, and maybe a little unfair to ask, but it seems like it makes sense to do an assessment since the ball does move forward to some degree every year at Sapphire.
I think I'd say that it looks a bit different now to 3 to 5 years ago. I mean, that diagram that we talked about with the business technology platform underneath and with the AI, embedded AI running on the top, and the big emphasis on lines of business.
Mhm.
Christian Klein in his keynote, he probably did a similar thing in Orlando, but emphasized, well, this is all about SAP and its customers working together. And the personas that he talked about were, chief people officer, chief financial officer, supply chain, IT, but IT with the CFO and so on. Yeah, very much kind of looking at line of business and not just IT. And so that looks different. It kind of looks maybe a bit fresher. Even the two of them as leaders, Julia White and Christian Klein, look he looks more kind of composed and assured than he did when he first took over. Feels a bit younger, feels a bit fresher, and they seem to leave the event in quite good heart. The celebration event in a way was very down to earth because all they did was they booked out some beachfront bars in Barcelona. So all the kind of customers and partners and so
It's
on
a tough job, but somebody has to do it. I would have loved to have been there.
had a very jolly time. That might seem trivial, but it sort of
Yeah.
tells you something about the kind of the social value, if you like,
Yeah.
of the SAP
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
Everyone had a good time. It didn't feel too corporate.
When,
Christian Klein seemed very relaxed on stage.
more so than
Um,
before. He was, it's going to be a hard job. We commented on that when he first took over, that he was relatively young, but this was a deliberate move on the part of Hasselplattner and the other supervisory board members to finally make the generational shift, probably out of necessity, but it is also time for within the company to hand over the reins. And Christian Klein certainly seems to have grown into the role. I like your take on where this puts SAP. It occurs to me that it is in line with what analysts like Gartner and others have been predicting for years. And sometimes you wonder if it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and with the symbiotic relationship that a lot of the vendors have with some of the main thought leaders and consultants, both in the analyst community and in the more brass tacks consulting world, like with PwC and EY and the others, that cloud is necessarily breaking apart monolithic ERP. No one's going to sell you one, let's call it a box, that does all the things you need in theory to run your company, that it's inevitably a multi-vendor world, and still with a mix, maybe more so than SAP would like, of on-premises and full SaaS cloud, and then the sort of hybrid cloud. And that's the world that was predicted, and SAP is living in it and adapting to it, and in a way that, you know, they've clearly made some major inroads with the business technology platform, and they really trying to make it happen. Yet I would also say that it's still a bit of an uphill climb for them and everyone else to take the customer with them too. It's one thing to sort of tell this story, and it's another thing to get people to come with you. And I
And
think
if I
that's
can
still
maybe
the
just say, offer one final thing as well on the sustainability front. I think they deserve a lot of credit for the emphasis they've put upon that in their Sapphire events and so on. But at the end of the day, they do have a lot of on-premise software running businesses across those 25 industries. So it's not all cloud. And by virtue of that, their carbon footprint of the SAP universe, not just SAP itself, but its customers, has to be quite high because it's not all cloud.
I would agree. And then even in the cloud, there's increasing awareness of what the big data centers call for in terms of water, not just.
And that's what someone like the CEO of NetSuite, Evan Goldberg, would definitely say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I said to him earlier this year in an interview, SAP has a very strong story on sustainability, and he practically laughed in my face as he said, well, NetSuite, we're cloud completely,
From the
100%.
beginning.
So
From the
by
beginning.
definition, we, we're doing a better job.
Right. There are efficiency. I would imagine even with the big data centers related to the big cloud hyperscaler providers, and even I would, presumably the SaaS applications that run on top of that there are still efficiencies. It's probably still better to have things consolidated in that way on a cloud system than to have many more local systems on premises. I would say that there probably are energy savings.
My overall take would be to say it just seems a bit fresher and a bit more vibrant maybe than it was before COVID times. But that may just be a reflection of the fact that we've pulled out of the COVID period and we're all going back to conferences in person again.
It's a celebratory time, I guess. People are relieved to be, as far as we know, mostly over COVID. Well, on that cheery note, Brian, this is probably a place to end the podcast. I thank you, as always, for a great conversation.
No, thank you so much for having me on again. It's been a while.
It has been.